Welcome to the Red Text,
a crossroads of the holy and heretical.
Join us now for another episode in Unholy Communion.
Hello and welcome back to the Red Text podcast. My name is Fonzie. I am Witch Illumisente on Instagram and Twitter.
And my name is Ryan, aka the Mestizo Mystic, and you can find me at the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram or just at Mestizo Mystic on Twitter. How you doing today, Fonzie?
Oh my God. Listen, Ryan, okay. Let's just, everyone calm down. Everyone just relax, okay? Because I'm talking to myself, honestly. Fonzie, you need to chill. Because today we have such an amazing guest. I mean, all of our guests are amazing, okay? But this particular guest is especially special for me because this is one of the first practitioners that I followed on all the social medias. This was the first, one of the first practitioners that I started learning things from. So the fact that this person is on our podcast right now is like this full circle moment, and I'm just so unbelievably excited. So that's how I am. And who is this person? This person is Frankie. They are also known as Chaotic Witch Ant on the Instagrams and your Twitter is different, right? Your Twitter is...
It's Ant Chaotic because apparently Chaotic Witch Ant is too long, which I think is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard too. But, and I have, and my handle is called Witch Illumisente. So like, that's it. But Frankie, hello, Frankie. How are you?
Hi. I'm very good. I'm very excited. I'm like beaming ear to ear right now because I love your guys' podcast. And I knew a little bit that Fonzie, that I was the first practitioner. You mentioned it in passing that I was the first practitioner that you watched. And now I'm like, it's hitting me. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this for a long time.
For a hot minute, because you're one of the first. You and Olivia, the Witch of Wanderlust, are probably the two first like witches on YouTube I started like watching and following. So for me, it's also just like, and it's just crazy because we've always just like gone back and forth on Instagram. You and I, Frankie, just like in group chats and stuff. But this is our first time actually talking face to face, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is like I get to actually have a conversation with them for once.
It's crazy, and I'm very excited. And yeah, how are you doing today, Ryan?
Yes, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm cramming in all my readings that are due before the first day of school, which is grad school in 2 weeks, and then I'm excited because I'm relocating branches in the company I work for, and I'm going to be working with a close friend of mine who I was friends with before we started working for this company. And it's just like, it's always nice to work with friends. It just makes going to work like less strenuous and just having like work best friends and stuff. So I'm stoked for that. But other than that, I've just been getting by day. I had a friend from college come into work today, and I hadn't seen them in like years, and they were like, Ryan. I was like, oh my God, hey. And they're like, how are you doing? I just was like, eh. And she's like, you know what? I appreciate the honesty because I'm feeling the same way the past 5 months. I'm like, yeah, I'm tired of lying to people. No, none of us are doing good. We're in like a year 3 of a pandemic, and so much is going on in the world. Who's good these days?
Right.
What's good?
Yeah, what's good?
What is? How do you define good? The world is on fire, but you know what makes.
But
it
I was
better
like, you know what? We're alive. We can only take
That's
it day
right.
by day.
I was just about to say that. I was like, what makes it better is knowing that we're alive, and I can sit down with 2 other amazing practitioners that I respect and love, and we can just talk and kiki and just talk about beautiful things and on a platform that we created. So there you go. That's a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing.
What are we talking about today, Fonzie?
Oh my gosh, what are we talking about today? I mean, we have Frankie here as our special guest. So I think what we need to do is first talk about the fact that Frankie is one, like I said, an incredible practitioner. Their feed is absolutely amazing. Also, an accomplished author, just recently released their first debut book. I think I want to talk about that first. Can we just talk about the book, which is sitting on my desk right now, which I read.
Oh my goodness.
It is called...
Do you have...
It's right here.
Oh, yeah. You got the US
so
copy.
Pretty.
It's such... the art. First of all, just looking at the... Here's the thing. I don't like... hear me out first. Okay, I'm gonna say this is gonna make you just people feel uncomfortable. I don't usually like hardcover books. I think they're cumbersome to, and I listen, see, look at Ryan's face. Listen.
No, I get it though. I get it.
I don't usually like hardcover books, only because they're easier to, if they're paperback, they're just easier to carry with me. All I want to do is hold this book because it's so the artwork is so freaking beautiful. I don't care if it's hardcover or paperback. It is such a beautiful book just to look at. Excuse me. But yeah, Frankie, you wrote this book and you released it this year. Can you kind of tell us what brought you to write this book?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question I get, and I wish I had a more exciting answer. Like, I wish that I had, like, a prophetic dream of me writing the book, or something, like, dramatic. Like, I inhaled a lot of bay leaves and was like, it's time! Nothing like that. I had an editor reach out to me and ask if I wanted to write a book, and I said, okay, tell me about the book, and they're like, well, this is the idea that we want. And they proposed the idea, and I was like, can I put anything I want in it? And they're like, yeah, you can have full, complete creative control over what's in it. And I'm like, okay, cool, I can do this. I think I can do this. Originally, like most emails I received, this was in 2020, I was like, is this a scam? Am I being scammed right now? Someone's scamming me into writing a book. But what ended up coming out of it is this kind of like labor of love, I think is the term, or like passion project, something that I felt like I needed when I was a beginner practitioner, when I was a beginner witch, because my first book was Scott Cunningham's Book of Shadows, which it's a horrendous piece of literature. It makes no sense. Listen, Scott Cunningham, he has a nice encyclopedia of herbs. That's about where my line, that's where I hit with him. I'm like, wow, I can look at an herb and know what it means. Okay, you can leave now. That's all right. That, and I had Tumblr and Pinterest. I was a Pinterest spells bitch back in the day. All right, I really was. But this was the book that I was like, I don't want it to be super religious or from a particular tradition. So I kind of took the most bare bones basic stuff that I had wished that someone told me to focus on at the beginning of my practice, and I put it in a book. So tools, protection, cleansing, banishing, binding. I think I put shadow work in there, which my opinion on shadow work has changed a little bit. Only because researching Carl Jung is like looking into history in the worst possible way, and you're kind of like, oh sweet Jesus, you said that? But like many popular white men of the day. But yeah, that's kind of how it came about, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of it being my first book, my debut book. Yeah, that's the spiel, so to speak.
I'm so excited to read it. I'm pretty sure it was a video you released, Frankie, but how you were saying how it's a good blend of a book for both beginner and intermediate witches. Could you tell me a little bit more about how it fits both of those categories? Like why do you feel like it fits in or encompasses more rather than just focusing on beginners? Like what do you feel like intermediate witches can gain from this book?
So I feel like it's a charcuterie board of witchcraft is what I call it. It has a little bit of everything. So let's say you're a beginner and you've done a lot of bare bones basic stuff, but you're not really sure where to go next. Spells for Change can easily give you an idea of something to look into that maybe you hadn't thought of before. Like let's say you didn't look into banishing or binding before, or even know a lot about domination magic. This book kind of gives you a springboard to bounce off of. It also has a lot of, I was very proud of this, a lot of resources. It's got some in-text citations. My editor was like, can we take these out? Yep. It's chunky. And I'm like, absolutely not. We are leaving them in. But the in-text citations too, it allows people to kind of read something and be like, this is really interesting. I want to learn more about it. And then immediately find the book that they are looking for to learn more about it. I did that with like Phil Hines' Chaos Magic, Laura E. Perez, Gloria Anzaldúa, a few other books that I, love and think that everyone should be reading are in there. And yeah, I think that like any book, my perspective and my UPG is in it as much as I tried to remove it.
Mhm.
And if someone's interested in my content or interested in what I talk about online, there's a chance that they'll get a nice little like nugget of Frankie wisdom in there. I'm not quite sure where, because I haven't read the book since I edited it, because I'm scared to. I'm like, I am scared that I'm gonna hate it. But it's in there. My perspective is kind of dotted all over the place.
I love that. There's nothing worse than reading a book and like seeing there's little to no like bibliography or resource section. It's like, okay, you gave me great information, but like, where do I go after this? You know?
Oh, sis, the bibliography is dense. It's dense.
Bibliography is my favorite part. If a book doesn't have a bibliography, I don't care if people say it's new material, if it's like all this stuff. I'm like, okay, you gave me 3 books to read. After this, like, am I supposed to, like, it feels like sources trust me, bro.
Yeah.
Someone wrote the book and they're like, trust me, bro, this is how it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
One of the things I really, really appreciated coming from someone who is a person of color is reading a book that was written by someone who is white and say that I am white. And I am very aware that I am white and that I do come from a place of privilege. And I understand that. I understand my privilege. So that's mentioned numerous times in the book, actually. And that's something that if I saw that in more books, I would have been like, you got me. I'm yours. You know what I mean? Because it makes the perspective much more valid to me as a person of color. And it also gives, I would just assume, folks who are white who maybe not understand that perspective when they see it in words and see it in print, be like, oh, maybe I need to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection, because it looks like Frankie's saying, because I mean, Frankie, it's no secret there are folks online who admire you and look up to you and, you know, see you as a role model. So there are, you know, people going into the craft who might not have, you know, that kind of part of their experience hasn't really happened yet. So seeing it in print in a book that was written by someone that they admire is kind of like the gateway to be like, oh, this is the best way to not be a shitty person.
I would hope so. I feel like, and I'm at the place where I'm like, everyone, it's the bare minimum to be like, I'm white and it gives me privilege. And then I see people not doing that. And I'm like, okay, we are years behind. I need you to speed it up. I'm going to start throwing books at you and you're just going to have to catch them and read them. Mm-hmm. But for me, that aspect of it was important because I feel like it's important for me as someone with a very large following, to have it be as safe of a space as I can make it for people of color, which it's been like 2 years of me working on that, and I'm still consistently learning and changing and trying to do better every day. But I was disappointed in some of the earlier books I read, and like Scott Cunningham and Silver Ravenwolf, in the way that there was no space for practitioners of color in these books. And I was kind of horrified that even more recently it felt like there wasn't space. So I'm like, all right, if no one else is doing this, I'm just gonna make the space, and we'll start there, and hopefully other people will start doing the same thing.
Absolutely. And Frankie, so the Magick that you mentioned in the book, because I've yet to read it too, it's on my TBR list, but what influences your craft that you've also contributed to this book? Because I know, like, when I first followed you, I don't know if you were too outspoken about your folk practice or folk magic just yet, which I know now, just like similar to our practices, you're very outspoken about being a folk practitioner. So what influences or what can be found in your book, especially for those who might be listening who might actually not be unfamiliar with your work? So what can they expect to find in your book and in your page, in your craft, in you, Frankie, as a practitioner?
What do they expect in you?
What is setting? Gotta set the bar like at a mid-low so they can have either be really impressed with my content.
That's the way to do it.
Like, this isn't what I asked for, so we're gonna hit with the nice average. A lot of the book was spells that I created myself, probably more material heavy than I would be doing my craft now. I was like, get a crystal and a candle and some herbs, and now I'm like, olive oil, call it good. Like, spray that shit in the corners. I'm like, I did a spell recently where I was like at my partner's house. I needed to draw a sigil on his body because we were doing some, sexy time magic. And I'm like, babe, do you have olive oil? And he hands me a spray can of olive oil. And I'm like, okay, do you have everything else I need? And he hands me like garlic salt and rosemary. And I'm like, this will work. This is good. This is perfect. And spray can olive oil, I don't know if it's real olive oil. It didn't look like real olive oil. It looks like butter. So I was just like, all right, we're gonna make this work today. I was definitely, I would say, more of an eclectic witch. I was still very much kind of finding my footing in what kind of spells I liked. But the spells I included in this book were a mix of like things tried and true that I had done for, excuse me, I burped. Oh my God, I burped again. A very long time. And some ones that I'm like, I changed the format of a spell I typically do because I didn't want to share it with everyone. More eclectic, but I still think that you can find elements of my folk magic. Like you'll see a lot of Rosemary in there because she's my main bitch. I love her.
Same.
You have to love Rosemary.
First queen.
She's amazing. But things like, I think it's very herb heavy, which is still something that is true to my practice. I work with a lot of herbal allies and they tend to be the push in a lot of my magic. I'm like surrounded by plants right now. So I'm like a big kind of more green witch than I am like, here's a candle, you're going to get porcupine quills, and you're going to get this one other thing. My tools tend to be very green. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I'm so jealous of your green thumb because you and my partner both have the greenest of thumbs. He's constantly buying new plants and showing me how well they're doing. And I'm like, I killed an air plant and a succulent, two of the hardest things to kill.
To be fair, succulents are the gremlins of the plant world.
Really?
Everyone says they are not hard to kill. Those fuckers die.
Okay, that makes me feel better, but I still killed an air plant.
They're like, air plants are also finicky, so don't be too hard on yourself. If you're looking for a boy you can just literally like ignore, put in a corner, ignore it, you're going to want a pothos.
I have one actually. I'm propagating it in water, but one of its leaves start to turn yellow, so I'm like...
That's okay.
No, that's fine. That happens all the time.
Happens all the time. Their old leaves turn yellow as long as the stem is nice and thick and juicy.
Okay.
And the rest of the leaves, like a couple yellow leaves, not a concern. I go over to my partner's house and I'm like, when did you water your plant last? There's like 3 dead leaves on it. He's like, I don't know. A month ago. And I'm like, it's still alive. It's fine. But plants are interesting. If we want to talk more about plants and plant magic, I'm always happy to, especially in the realm of folk magic. But whatever, that's my bipothos tip.
No, I love that. And I just want to reel back to what you said before. It's like, it's how a lot of I'm guilty of this too, and I know that Ryan is too, because we've talked about this. How at the beginning of everyone's practice, it's kind of a lot of your practice is very material heavy because that's what's kind of expected, because it's kind of like what everyone kind of shows, because that's what's the most visually striking, the most like satisfying to look at. Mm-hmm. But like if you put like a bottle of olive oil and holy water in a picture and be like, what am I supposed to do with, you know what I mean? So like, I understand where that comes from. But like when we talk about folk practices, because all of us who are sitting here right now are folk practitioners, it is a craft of need. It is a craft of what you have around you, right? So it's really like there was a time when my friend was moving into a new apartment, and she's not really spiritually inclined in any way. They don't really see the world that way. But for some reason, she was inclined to ask me, do you mind doing like just an energy cleanse or do something with the apartment just so it feels lighter in here? Because like, I guess they didn't feel good when they walked in. I was like, sure. Do you have anything? And it's like this, my friend is moving from their mom's house, so they have nothing in their pantry, right? They don't have anything to bring with them. But the one thing that they had, or the things that they had, was from dinner the night before, which was avocado oil, salt, and garlic powder.
Oh, nice.
And
That's
I
a
was like,
spell.
that's exactly what I need. That is
Perfect.
all I need. Yeah, that is literally all I need. So I did this whole thing. We did this whole, and then I told us like, I don't even need any of this. We can literally just sit in the middle of your apartment and pray, and then we're good. You know, that's all we really have to do. And you can do this yourself. You don't need me here to do it. You know how to pray. She's a Christian, so I'm like, you know how to pray. Pray all you want. You know what I mean? That'll cleanse your space and look like that. You know, it's so easy. And like going to your sink, getting a glass of water, praying over it, saying, let this water blah 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 blah, take the water and sprinkle it over your house. That's all you need to do. It's so simple. You don't have to, you don't have to go I mean, you definitely can. I think going through the whole thing, using materials and doing through having like a whole incantation and going through the process, of course it helps. There's a reason why people do it. But also you also don't have to. If you're in a pinch, do something with what you have. That's the whole point. That's the reason why folk magic exists, because it was by the people, for the people, and what those people usually had was what they had access to, which was usually not much. So whatever you have around you, just use it.
Oh yeah.
Could you touch on, Frankie, if you're more open to sharing more about like the folk aspects of your practice? Because I saw your TikTok the other day of like how you started out like eclectic and then worked with a bunch of deities, and now it's just like a patron and a handful of deities. So how did you work your way from eclectic to identifying and working as a folk practitioner with like, for instance, Saint Mary or Saint Michael?
I would say my ancestors didn't give me much of a choice. And I know that sounds funny, but if anyone here or anyone listening does ancestor veneration and then you move into ancestor work, they really are just like, this is what you're doing. And you say, excuse, and then that's it. It's over. Diana prompted it as well. Diana came in, and then every other deity was like, we're leaving. See you later. And I was like, is this my life now? I got one of you bitches? And I do. Diana's still around to this day. But I don't know. I think it moved quick. I think my progression from eclectic to folk practitioner was very quick. I started looking into Italian folk magic because I knew then my ancestors had done something along the lines of folk magic. Just from hearing stories about my great-grandma and things that they said and did. And then within a couple months, I was like, ooh, we are here. I need to learn all these things. And there was a specific book too that I read, and it jump-started like a lot, which was Italian Magic: Secret Lives of Women, which is like in-person research done by the author for like years upon years. She goes every summer and she talks to the healers. So like the amount of traditions, superstitions, cures that are in this book is insane. But yeah, folk magic still, even now, I would say a large portion of my practice has become folk magic, if not every part of it. There are still spells that I do that wouldn't typically be found in my branch of folk magic, and they're more, from the eclectic witch days. But when I have a choice between a, novena prayer with a candle or kind of a spell that I created when I was 16, I'll probably go for the novena prayer. Because for me, I burped again. Sweet Jesus.
It's the spirits that make you gaspy.
It's the spirits making me burp. They're going to make me yawn soon. It's going to be a mess. For me, that kind of the folk magic I do, the way that folk Catholicism intertwines with it, it's so natural to me. It's like, it's natural for me to do a protection spell and pray the rosary throughout the entire burning. These things are like, someone else may be like, why would you do that? Like, why would you pray the rosary? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's almost like I don't know what they call it. Some sort of subconscious memory has clicked on for me in a lot of aspects of my practice, and I guess people would call it like genetic memory or ancestral memory. A lot of it just feels natural to me. Like it's natural for me to do certain prayers in the morning or certain prayers with other things. I spend a lot of my time praying. People don't think I do. I usually do a lot of prayers to Mary, and then I will yell at Diana because that's how I get through to her. But I hope that makes sense and answers the question an appropriate amount.
Absolutely. I'm actually really curious. Like, I haven't really worked with any really any deities. Most of my practice has been saints, couple angels, and Mary and Santa Muerte. So I'm curious if you're open to sharing like what's it like the juxtaposition between like praying to Mary, for instance, and like praying to Diana.
Oh boy. So, this is such a good question. So there's juxtaposition, but for me, my UPG, my personal gnosis, is that Diana and Mary are two sides of the same coin. Specifically, Our Lady of the Woods, which was discovered like mere miles from Diana's original worship site at Nemi. Ooh. And has kind of branched all the way out to, I found a temple to her in, like a church, temple's the wrong word. Our Lady of the Woods exists in Colorado, which is really weird to have that trickle all the way from Lake Nemi and Rome to Colorado, which is where I now am. The other half of it, when I'm praying to Our Lady of the Woods, I'm typically praying to both Mary and Diana together, or I am separating Mary of the Miraculous Medallion, which was the Mary my ancestors prayed to for generations and generations, and Diana. And for me, because they're so heavily intertwined, I can only really describe the difference in them in vibes. Mary kind of feels like softer and more motherly, and she's always felt that way to me. Mm-hmm. Every single part of her has always felt like she shows up when I need guidance, when I really need, when I'm really praying as much as I can pray. Diana is a little bit kind of like a rocky cliff face, and she says, all right, if you want this, you got to climb up yourself. And you're like, how do I do that? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm sure that there are also parts of Mary that represent that aspect of Diana in the same way that there are aspects of Diana, like Juno Lucifera or Diana Lucifera, that represent that motherly aspect of Mary. It really is for me just a choice in, am I praying to the Diana epithet that is motherly, or am I praying to the Mary part of Mary that is more, vengeance, or am I switching them? And I know there's going to be a Catholic listening to this being like, you can't treat Mary as a goddess. Oh, hell yeah, I can. What are you going to do?
Watch me.
She's for me, on the same par with Diana in a lot of ways, which within Marian traditions, there is heavy veneration of Mary, but because she is so intrinsically tied to my family, in the same way Diana is tied to my family, both of them, I'm like, well, you two can decide who's handling this. They're still separate entities, but because of their history and because of the way they've kind of almost switched back and forth, Diana was there, Mary was there, Diana was there, depending on who was praying. Mm-hmm. I consider them almost like two entities tied together with a nice little red string. And it just kind of depends on how I'm approaching it and what kind of prayer I'm doing. Even with Diana, even though she's a deity and I kind of have her as a divine being, there are a lot of times where I would lower her down more to, I wouldn't say saint status, but her divinity kind of becomes more human and then becomes less human and then more human, depending on which epithet I'm praying to or how I'm praying to her. Am I yelling at the sky, asking for rain, or am I sitting down and doing a really constructive hymn to her and an invocation and a conjuration? It really depends.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I feel like Mary's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Fonzie.
No. I was just going to say, I love the way I love the way you see it. I love the way you see both of those entities and how they kind of intermingle with each other. Because You know what, Ryan, you say what you're about to say because I'm about to ask a question. So you say what you have to say. 'Cause I'm about
Oh,
to
yes,
ask-
please. I was just going to say, it reminds me of Mary in a lot of ways. You know, there's so many countless epithets of hers, like Mary, Queen of Heaven, or La Virgen de Guadalupe. But I was just thinking, like, you know, Queen of Heaven, but then La Virgen de Guadalupe, who was syncretized with Tonantzin, who's the goddess of the earth. So you have that more heavenly aspect, and then you have the one that's more, I guess, for lack of a better term, like on the physical realm, or at least like closer to the earth with us. So I can see that now that you talk about Diana in that way, but I never really thought about Mary's titles as like kind of like fluctuating on that vibration. I always saw them as just individual personas, but now I can see how like kind of like the wavelength of what you're working with is depending on who you're calling on, of course. But I just didn't think about that until you mentioned that relationship with Diana. So it was beautiful.
I always think too, in terms of, I call Mary's, you know, different versions epithets a lot of times, because to me they are different epithets of Mary. They're all under Saint Mary, the Blessed Virgin, but then they kind of split off. Every single one has a different patronage on top of what Saint Mary already rules over, being the mother of Jesus. So then each one is, you're going to find and connect with that specific epithet or version of her when you're closer to her patronage. So with some, like you said, Queen of Heaven, we can find Queen of Heaven in some ancient goddesses whose names were also Queen of Heaven. So you may be a little closer to the Queen of Heaven when you're looking at that patronage and those connections, versus, let's say, Mary of the Miraculous Medallion, very specific to a medal. That's what we get. And so when I'm wearing that medal, that's how I'm closest to her. That's a very physical, ordinary thing that I would almost classify as like a spirit. It's not a saint, it's a spirit of a medal, or even like an egregore once we get there. And we pray to her, but Mary the Miraculous Medallion is just a symbol. It's not. Are you wearing it?
I never take this off. This is not the Muerte pendant. Never ever.
It's a symbol, and then we have like specific epithets that are related to location. So Cosenza, which is my ancestors' town, the patron saint is like Madonna del Pilario, the Lady of the Pillar, and it is specific to. I know. Why are you smiling?
Why are you smiling like that?
Why are you smiling like that?
Because a friend of mine recently went to Spain and brought me back a rosary, and the three-way connectors Our Lady of the Pillar, but she's also a patronage of a region of the Philippines my grandpa was from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain her. She's in like one town in Italy, and then everywhere else is in Philippines or Spain. And I'm like, how did you get here? And it's not even, it's like, it's considered the same by a lot of people. And I'm like, hello, what? How did we get here? Like, how did you get to the middle of southern Italy? But she's specific to location. And like her patronage is, I don't even know. She was found in Cosenza because like she stopped a plague from happening, or she helped with disease, and like an image of her showed up on a wall, I think. Wow. But I have no connection to her because I've never been to my ancestors' town. There's no way for me, apart from my ancestors' lineage, to really call on her and, get a response. And I would almost consider that to be a land spirit or a spirit of location, like Genius Loki. Loki? One of those. It's names for spirits of the land, and I have no idea how to say it. But I would consider her more along the lines of like a protector of a place, like a land spirit, than I would a saint. Because if you're talking to her all the way in like Colorado, USA, and she is in Italy, how are you going to connect with her? Past having like a rosary with her emblem on it. And then, we can tie that back to, if you're working with a particular land spirit, do you have something from that land? Do you have something to represent that spirit? So I see these things of Mary almost as like, there's probably a weird land spirit that was then deemed an epithet of Mary, which is the same as an epithet of Mary. It is an epithet of Mary. But before then, what was it? I call Diana sometimes the Mary before Mary. I do with a lot of goddesses, because she was representative of a lot of things that Mary represents before Mary existed. But at the same time, she is Mary, in the same way Mary is Diana. Mary was always in Diana, it just took certain people pulling it out. and finding the kind of subcontext within other goddesses to say, this is Mary, mother of Jesus.
Totally. Fonzie, what was your question?
So I was just so enthralled in what she was what you were talking about. I just totally forgot. Fuck. Oh no, I remember. But before I go, oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget it again. Before I go into what I was gonna ask, the thing that it's not a coincidence that folks have been seeing apparitions of Mary everywhere in regards to different cultures and different deities. It's not a coincidence. It's happening. It happened everywhere, and it's happening all over the place. And the fact that folks are seeing parallels in their traditional, in their own traditions that go back even before Christianity was a thing, and then now, it's not a coincidence. The fact that there are parallels to these deities and these spirits and these land spirits, and also with Mary and with other saints and with other, with other spirits of different culture, it's all kind of interwoven with each other, right? And it's not necessarily the spirits, it's the people. It's the people that are making that happen. So that's why there's a lot of aspects of goddesses in the Philippines who also share the same attributes that Mary has, right? And there are different aspects of Mary that line with different goddesses from the Philippines or from here in the United States. It's the same exact thing. That whole idea of interweaving different, these spirits, it's not a new idea. And the fact that you feel like Diana and Mary are kind of the same but also separate, I totally get that. Like, I totally understand that. My question is that when you started to intermingle like your neo-pagan kind of, and I don't know if that's the right term you want to use. I know that you've used.
I would say I call myself a neo-pagan for a while. I no longer identify as a pagan, but I was definitely a neo-pagan.
Yeah. So like from like transitioning from like incorporating your neo-pagan kind of ideals, like your the way that you see your spirits, the way you see your deities, and then incorporating folk Catholicism, was there any sort of conflict that you had with those spirits?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I knew the answer to that question. So if you feel comfortable, like, would you be willing to expand on that?
Yeah, I started saint work before I really let go of the idea of deity work. And I had a saint altar. I had an altar to Saint Michael and Saint Peter, which, by the way, Saint Peter is a whole other story. My family like talked shit about him for a while, and then I was like, I shouldn't work with you. And then recently he was like, if I help you with this, will you pray to me again? And I was like, yeah. Are you gonna do that? And he's like, yeah, give me a second. And I'm like, okay, now he's back in it. But I think originally I pushed against the saints very hard because a lot of the associations that I found with them were, very church heavy. And I say church heavy because I separate the church and folk Catholicism, and then even then Christians, because 100%. The church is the problem. I have not met a single folk Catholic that I haven't fell in love with, that I haven't hasn't been the most accepting and most loving and amazing person. And then Christians, I know I'm saying that to you guys. Christians are one way or the other, depending on where, what denomination, but I don't try to meet a Christian and make assumptions about them based off of what I know about the church. Sometimes I do. That's not true. I should probably confess that I do sometimes make assumptions. That's okay. So do I.
We're all
yeah. I'm like,
same.
Especially when it comes to someone saying I'm a Christian. I'm like, we need to talk a little bit longer.
Let's unpack that.
Let's talk about it a little more. Like, do you have you come to terms with your religious trauma yet? And they're like, what? That's not real. And I'm like, okay, that's where we are.
Gotta go.
Be review.
Have you actually found our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, or do you think you have
found him yet? Do you know? Have you talked to Jesus? And they're like, I talk to Jesus every day. And I'm like, no, but talk to him. Talk to him.
Are you talking at him or to him?
You're talking at him or to him. But yeah, I think I pushed back because I was surrounded by people who worked with a lot of deities, entities, demons. That was where I thought I was supposed to go. I thought that was right for me, even though it was always exhausting for me and felt like a lot. And as soon as I had like the last of my deities that I've been working with, because I was working with 4 at one point, all from different pantheons. Don't look at me. I don't know how I did it. 2020 Frankie was on like steroids. I don't know how. I look back and I'm like, oh sweet Jesus, what was happening here? But I had this kind of pushback to it, and then once the last of the kind of idea that I was supposed to be a neo-pagan and do this specific thing fell apart, I was like, all right, now I gotta figure out how to do this. Like, I gotta figure out how to take these things that my ancestors did for years and bring it into a practice where I already know that I'm not a Christian. I am not a Catholic. And it started with like just reading a lot and seeing the ways in which, especially in Rome and in Greece, certain temples to the Madonnas had originally been temples to goddesses, and then seeing certain epithets transform into certain apparitions of Mary. And so that's where it started. And with Mary, it was very specific because I was like, I tried to work with Mary. And so my fun story about Saint Mary, I say Saint Mary because it was just Saint Mary back then. I didn't work past Saint Mary. I ordered a pendant to honor Saint Mary, and it was 9 months back ordered, and it passed like a 3-month point, and I was like, I'm not getting this, and I gave up on it. And then I hit a point, and I had realized Diana was my patron goddess, and that was what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be following her lead, and then the Mary pendant arrived in the mail. And I said, oh, you just wanted me to make sure I knew who you were? Like, it was like ancestors and saints were holding their breath till I figured out where I was supposed to be going. And as soon as I did, it was like speed running this. I was like, oh sweet Jesus, here we go. And then that was it. It's like been a year, almost 2 years since I started on this. And the bulk of my learning has been in the past year through just absorbing information and taking classes and learning and following my intuition. And all of that is culminated into this, like, yeah, this just feels natural now. Like, as soon as I let go of the idea of what I was supposed to be doing, everything clicked. And then St. Michael showed up, and I was like, well, can you help me? And he was like, no, I can't. Listen, I love St. Michael so much. I have his candle. I love his candle. I will pray to that. I will pray to that son of a every day, and he will just ignore me until he sees fit to intervene.
Okay, thank you. I have been talking to Ryan for the last almost a year, talking about how Michael does not listen to me. He
doesn't.
Literally, it on purpose. I think he knows how riled up I got. I get so pressed, and like I think every single time I talk about it, it kind of adds to his like fire, like literally saying like, okay, like every single time you talk shit about me, dude, I'm not gonna talk to you. Like stop talking shit, and maybe I'll like start to. But see, okay, good. Now that Frankie said it, I feel a lot better. Thank God, because I'm doing the exact same thing.
Oh, it's something with angels. I love angels. I love especially archangels. It honestly feels like whether it's life or death, they're just not going to show up. They may send a messenger. And they may send a messenger to be like, hey, we're taking care of this. Like a nice little bird or a sign or something. Have I ever experienced St. Michael in all his glory? No. He will not come. He will not show up. And I'm like, I'm going to light your candle and say a novena to you. And like silence. And then on the last day or like 6 days later, he's like, oh, I did this for you. And I'm like, I asked someone else already. You didn't answer. I get, it's also just, I think archangels. I find it more difficult to connect with archangels because it feels like they are always making sure it's for the greater good. If it's not for the greater good, if it's just a personal kind of whim, something that you want that may not benefit the people around you, even if it's like unintentional, he's not going to help me. I have to go to like someone more on a human level, which is when I go to St. Peter and I'm like, hey, remember how you founded the church? Can you help me on a whim? Can you help me with my little like thing, my little emotion? Can you help? Which is just like different vibes of saints and archangels lead me to working with them in different ways. I call in St. Michael for protection. I've given him a couple spells to handle. I'm like, just take this and I'm going to pretend you're listening and you'll handle it. And it's been fine. But I talk to St. Mary the most. Excuse me, I burped again. Oh my God, the spirits. I talk to St. Mary the most. I talk to St. Anthony the most. Those two, I'm like, hey, St. Anthony, I lost my debit card. Can you help me out, please? And he's like, yeah, I got you. First day of novena, there it is. And I'm like, thank you, St. Anthony. He's my go-to at this point. I'm like, I need help with this random thing that you don't have patronage over. Can you help me? And he's like, yeah, I got you. And I'm like, thanks, St. Anthony.
I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy working with saints until I started working with saints. Like, I've posted on my page that St. Francis is the first one I ever reached out to. And he showed up and out literally like a day after praying. Because after my cat, we had to put my cat to sleep. And so I was like, St. Francis, like, I know you love animals. Can you just like give me a sign that my cat crossed over, is, you know, happy, at peace? And like literally 2 days later, like I got, you know, a sign, and it was like a miraculous sign. It wasn't just like, you know, angel numbers, but it was like, yeah, okay, cool. I know pumpkin's at rest. And then I still work with St. Francis, and I've recently started working a lot with St. Jude, and St. Jude is like, I know he's known for being miraculous and always showing up and out, but I didn't know how much, like, for me,
I gotta hit up St. Jude.
St. Jude's awesome. I just got this beautiful 3rd class relic rosary, so it was touched to one of his 1st or 2nd class relics. I'll send you the link. I will send you the link. I don't know if they're out of stock or not. It's only $10. I'm just saying. I know. I'll send you the whole Etsy. It's full of 3rd class relics. It's awesome. But yeah, St. Jude, amazing. I will say Archangel Raphael was the first archangel I worked with or reached out to, and he was pretty easygoing. And
he was very easy to work with. Yeah, he's very easy to work with.
I think it's just Michael.
Really quickly.
It's just fucking Michael.
I'm trying to work with Michael. I'm starting out like by just praying to him, not asking for anything. Like I got his chaplet a couple weeks ago, and I've just been praying his chaplet as frequently as possible.
I was telling Ryan, I was like, if you start working with Michael now, and I've been working with Michael I've been trying to work with Michael for over a year, and he reaches out to you, and you guys become friends, I'm gonna be so pissed.
Throw something at Ryan.
I'm gonna be so mad. I'm gonna be so.
It's been a year, almost over a year for me, and he doesn't help me with shit. He helped me once in a blue moon when my ancestors also. It's like ancestors and St. Michael are a package deal. If the ancestors aren't helping, St. Michael's not going to help. If St. Michael isn't helping, ancestors are going to be like, Mary or Diana can take this one.
Interesting.
I don't know why. I think it's an Italian thing because we love St. Michael. St. Michael's big. Like the garlic is associated with him, all these things. So he, out of all the saints, is very intrinsically tied to like the identity of my Italian ancestors. And then St. Anthony and St. Mary are more like, I know for a fact that my recent generation is tied. We're very intrinsically intertwined. That's the word, with them.
Words are hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. I don't know words. English? What? I can't.
I mean, I've been a dumb bitch my whole life, but I feel like ever since I got COVID a few months ago for the first time, my dumb bitchery has been even worse. Like my brain fog, just like, oh, you've lost your vocabulary. You're purely dumb bitch energy now.
I have trouble with words that have the same 2 letters. I'm like, same 2 letters in the front, and then I'm like, there could be 3 different things, and I have to guess.
Okay, well, on that note, make sure you pick up Spells for Change, a book that Frankie wrote that has a word in it.
I know I wrote a book. Once you get me on a podcast, we're done for. I'm going to mess up words every 5 minutes. That book took so long. I literally think we were doing an audiobook for it, and I mispronounced several words that I had written in the book. I had written them multiple times, and I say it out loud, and they're like, I think it's actually this, and I'm like, no, it's not. And then I look it up, and I'm like, oh my god, I wrote this 100 times, and I've been saying it wrong.
Oh no.
So that's how I am.
Totally understand. Words, no, but like all jokes aside, words are hard, so that's fine. You're okay.
They're hard.
You are forgiven. So I mean, you mentioned prior that you don't necessarily consider yourself a Catholic, right? But there is a lot of Catholic aspects that you incorporate into your craft. Is that something that Italian folk magic generally looks like, or what does Italian folk magic look like in regards to?
That's such a good question.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so excited to answer this. So Italian folk magic, by my understanding, is separated in kind of two categories. We have benedicaria, which is the holy way of blessing, was coined by a very specific person I am forgetting the name of, as the Catholic Italian folk magic. And then anything that is not benedicaria is stregoneria, or Italian folk magic or witchcraft is what we would use. Depending on who you ask, Italian folk magic is going to look very different. I know Italian folk practitioners that think that you need to accept Jesus in order to be an Italian folk practitioner. You need to be a born-again Christian. I know Italian folk practitioners like me that have a couple Roman or Greek deities around, but they primarily work with saints and do prayers to the saints. And then I kind of know the in-between, where it's like, there's like the side of only works with deities, only petitions saints for certain things, and all the way to the other side of fully Catholic, will not condone anything that is not that. I'm trying to remember the things we do, ways of the Holy Benedetta. The way he describes benedicaria versus stregoneria is benedicaria, or being a benedetta, is you follow the rules of the Bible. You are a Christian. Anything outside the rules of the Bible, stregoneria, you are an Italian folk practitioner, but you are like a witch, more of a witch. So anything having to do with love magic, hexes, domination, anything that is not said it is okay in the Bible, stregoneria. But he also admits that both of them are intrinsic. They are intertwined. So we got this kind of imagined wall. And I say imagined because talk to any Italian folk practitioner who's like in the middle of these two things, and we're like, oh yeah, I talk to the saints on Sunday and pray to Satan on Mondays, like something along those lines. I wouldn't say Satan because we don't talk to demons. I've tried, it doesn't work. My ancestors said, no, and I'm like, okay, cool, back to Saint Mary. But depending on who you ask, I mean, we have like Mary Grace Fauren, who wrote Italian Folk Magic, who talks about such a good book. Talks about saints and Madonnas and working with them and praying and doing the rosary, and then also talks about her patron goddess Aphrodite in the same breath. So that's where, and a lot of Italian folk practitioners who are Italian Americans, and even some who are in Italy, will have that. They will have this kind of connection with maybe one or two deities, and then everything else is what we would consider folk Catholicism, even if they don't say that they're Catholic or Christian. I have my friend like Folk Fran, who's definitely more along the sides of like a Marian devotee. If someone on the outside looked at him or looked at them, they would be like, that's a Catholic. Whereas they're sitting there like, I just love Mary. So it's this kind of like, you're going to have people who say that if you're not a Catholic, you're not an Italian folk practitioner. On the other side, I'm like, well, I work with saints as spirits who can help me. I, pray to Saint Mary very frequently, but I also work with deities of ancient religions and land spirits. And so I hit the kind of like, and land spirits are also very big. We all we all mess around with lattes and like plants. It's that's always very intrinsic to folk magic, is even if it's not animism, it's that herbal allyship or connecting with the land around you. Yeah, it totally depends on who you ask, because for me, I'm kind of like, I use a Christian framework to talk to the saints and to do certain things, and I use Christian prayers or Catholic prayers in a lot of my spells, and I will pull from the things we do is the Holy Benedetta for specific spells to help me with certain things that are framed around like Christian ideals. But then I will do other things that if someone may be like, that's witchcraft, if they were very Catholic. And I'm like, hey, I talked to the she-wolf of Rome, and they're like, what? And I'm like, she just kind of hangs out in the corner. For me, that intersection of the ancient deities, land spirits, and the saints and ancestors, of course, is so natural. It feels right. And I've talked to other Italian folk practitioners about this. They're like, I don't know why, but it's just like, it clicked. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is what we're supposed to be doing. It's that kind of, you'll hit a point and it feels right, and you just stop there. And it's going to be different for every single folk practitioner, especially Italian folk practitioner, because when we look at the north to the south, there's so many differences. Even in,
I was just about to ask, does that differ from region to region? Because I'm assuming, listen, pardon my ignorance, but I know that there are Italians who are like, which part of Italy are you from? You know what I mean? So I know that there's aspects of different regions and different parts of Italy that makes people different in how they live their lives. So would you expand on region to region? How does that differ?
So north, we have the Alpines. We have the Alps. I believe we have a mountain range. And because of that mountain range, folk magic travels all throughout that mountain range. So we will see similarities with like German folk magic and other places along those Alps, that mountain range in northern Italy. So I talked with a German folk practitioner recently, and they were like, that's really crazy because this is really similar to this, which is in Italy, but this is in Germany. Things like deity is overlapping. We're like, they have a Christmas spirit that comes on the Epiphany, and we have Befana, the Epiphany witch. So things that kind of spread down the mountain range, we can see in northern Italy. Once we get into kind of central Italy, we see a lot more, I'm going to say metropolitan type stuff. We have bigger cities, we have Rome, we have Venice, we have a lot of different things. Those were kind of the areas that were very dominated by Roman religion and even Greek religion. So the folk magic there has more influence from Roman religion, which isn't bad. It's very cool. I don't study that area as much because I'm not from there. Northern I know because I've talked to people about it. So then we got central Italy. And so central Italy is like, there's definitely a lot of regions in there with folk magic, but it looks a little bit more kind of like, I could definitely connect this directly back to either like Roman or something else. And then we get to southern Italy. So southern Italy is big. It's very big. I've done so much research on southern Italy, and I'm like, is this near the town I'm from? And I'm like, how is that a day away? Like, it's southern. What? We got, and my family is from the Boot, is what we're called, is Calabria. So we're at the way bottom. And when we get to kind of certain regions in the way bottom, historically, they were more rural. There were a lot of farms. And even in Rome and certain areas in central Italy, when we have the farms, and depending on the region, if they were more mountainous, if they were more kind of next to the ocean, the ingredients for the spells will change. When we look at Sicily, which is an island in Sardinia, they have traditions that nowhere else in Italy has. And they have ingredients like seaweed or a certain type of kelp that they use in their protective charms. That you will not find anywhere else in Italy because it was right next to them. Versus Cosenza, where I'm from, which is in Calabria, it was like the capital for the Bruti before they fell to Rome. Like they had there was like a whole fight there. Also, someone buried their treasure there, and they're currently looking for it, which is like absolutely insane.
That's crazy.
There's a guy's, hold on, I can tell you his name. Guy's Treasure Cosenza. Yeah, okay. Alaric's looted treasures of Rome, and it has supposedly almost 25 tons of ancient artifacts.
Wow.
What?
Because apparently Alaric had his soldiers say, I want to get buried. We're going to bury me on the river. So they stopped the river. They kind of stopped it up. They dug him into the river and they buried him under the river. And so this is like a legend. And now there are like archaeologists looking for it, being like, so we're going to start looking for that 25 tons of treasure that you supposedly have now. Which is crazy. So King Alaric II was, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was, the king of the Visigoths. So Cosenza was kind of a hub. We had Visigoths come in. We had the Bruti, which is the traditional kind of Italic tribe that was located in the area. We had Rome. We had Greece. So when we look at Cosenza and kind of areas that have had many, many people come in and out, the folk magic shifts a little bit and then shifts back. And of course, it's very dominated by Christianity now. But certain traditions stay in that area, and they may have been influenced by like King Alaric's superstitions and filtered down through folk magic. Things that are close to Rome, we can see, I mean, the book is Vestiges of Ancient Cultures and Customs in Modern Italy and Sicily. And also it's like, this guy is like a Protestant, so to be completely transparent, and it's also written in the 1800s, so he goes in and he's like, these guys use like bronze spoons, so did the Romans, heathens. That's the vibe of the book. But every once in a while he draws a connection between a area that is dedicated to the Madonna or the church, and it used to be dedicated to a god. And that happens around Rome. We have like two freaking gods that I forget the name of that are now like Cosmo and Damien's altar and shrine. So around Rome, more of those temples existed and got transformed into something Christian. And there are even more specific Madonnas too. Oh my god, this is such a big rant. Anyways.
You're fine. You're good.
Depending on the region, because people come to me and they're like, I want to learn about Italian folk magic. And I'm like, okay, do you know where you're from? And if they say no, there's no way for me to help them because it's so different. There are some traditions that persevere. There's some things like the oil in the water to diagnose malocchio. But even then, when you look at different regions, they have different cures that were more common in that area. Like there's some where saint medallions are used, or water and wheat, or an egg is used. We have like our tradition of the egg cleanse, which is only found in one specific region. So if I don't know where someone is from, I'm like, I can't help you, because you could like look at the south and it turns out you're from the north, and you should be studying something closer to like German folk magic. And if you're from the north and you're looking at the south, which was like is heavily influenced by, you know, the rural area or the sea that is around it, there's nothing I can, like, you're gonna get messed up, because north we have mountains, south we have the sea, and, you know, farmers, which is like when we look at southern Italy or Sud Italia, a lot of the folk magic hinges upon the idea of farming. So we have a lot of spells that are like, the farmer doesn't want it to rain so he can work. So he goes outside and yells at the sky and says, don't rain. And that's like a folk spell. And we have materials like horseshoes or iron or things that you could typically find on a farm that areas in Rome or like around metropolitan areas in Italy, they wouldn't have had those things. They would have no idea where to get a horseshoe, or like, there's a specific thing too, like there's like part of a wheelbarrow or something. That's not specific, but things like that, very typical in southern Italy. And then Sicily and Sardinia are very similar to southern Italy, but with a little bit more. They're a little bit different. Sometimes you see Sicilian things and you're like, what is this? We don't have that. And they're like, Sicilian, darling, like that. So it's and someone was telling me, well, Sicily and South Italy are right next to each other, so they're very similar. And I'm like, yeah, but there is water between them. There is an ocean between them. And that makes all the difference. It makes it more difficult for traditions to pass from South Italy to Sicily. Unless we are talking about the city that is right there, right at the port between Sicily and southern Italy. But if you go up a little further, if you are in a rural town or a town that used to be rural, no farmer is going to spend a day traveling a week down to the port and then into Sicily unless he has to. And so we have, a couple instances of like travel in that way. Like I traced some family to Puglia and then into Cosenza, which is like on the map of Italy, like this far apart. And past then, like we were all in Cosenza. So one group of people I could find moved. Everyone else has been there for like hundreds of years. But I hope that makes sense. I was very long-winded. Oh my God.
No, that was much appreciated. And I mean, like, that's important for... Oh, were you talking to, Fonzie? I think your microphone's on mute.
Oh, sorry. No, I was gonna say the regional part just reminds me of the Philippines, because the Philippines is just a country full of islands. Everything is
over 7,000.
Yeah, there's water in the way of everything. The thing about it is, here's the thing. I don't know if a lot of people know this. Every single one of those islands has their own tongue. So, like, before bridges and boats were a thing, everyone spoke their own language. So it's like there are thousands of dialects in the Philippines, to the point to where it's unrecognizable from, like, people in the south can't speak to the people in the north with their native, like, dialect, because it's so different from each other, because they, so with that, cultures also develop differently, right? There are a lot of parallels. I think that's kind of the reason why I know that magic exists and all of these things exist, because a lot of these things do parallel, but they differ in regards to region and what is available to the people, like to the folks who actually utilize it, right? So that when you were telling me how diverse Italy is, even though a lot of Italy is not even, there's nothing,
there's no
like
water. It's all the same.
Body of water.
Yeah.
There's no body of water in the way. It's the people that make the difference, right? It's the culture that makes the difference. So that's the first thing that popped in my head. I was like, that's exactly what the Philippines is. It's so incredibly diverse, even though everyone kind of looks the same, more or less. The cultures and the traditions that people were brought up and their ancestry is so different sometimes. But yeah, I stole the mic from you, Ryan. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
You stole the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to mention the juxtaposition of how just regional variances in magic and practices. And I was going to mention the Philippines, but even in, Latin America, South America, depending where you are, the magic is going to look, vastly different. So that's all I was going to say.
No folk magic can be a monolith, even within countries that are considered small. Especially, like, I'm thinking, like, within South America, how many different regions are there? How many different environments and different herbs that change from place to place? And every single one of those has a group of people who learned those herbs and learned how to use them, and then developed magic around that, and developed magic depending on what the people in the area needed, and basically what was called for. So if you are in a sailing town, you're going to have a lot of magic talking about whether it's going to rain the next day and how to stop a storm. If you're in a farming town, you're going to have a lot of magic telling you how to figure out how to get good corn, or good crops that year, or how to tell the sky. And so within that, I'm even thinking, like, the US is big, but every single state has how many different biomes in it? And then imagine each biome has a group of people learning that biome and learning what they need to survive in that biome. And then that's across the whole US. That's every country. Sweet Jesus, hello? It sounded like thunder.
I was about to say it. It sounded like there was thunder over there.
I think someone just moved something, which is like, I'm underneath a dining room. I hear everything. Someone dies, and I'm like, well, there goes another one. Like, if anything happens, if there's an intruder, I'm going to be the first one to know, which is, like, not great for me, because I'm not armed. I have a plant. That's it. Like, I can throw an ivy at their head. That's it. Start chucking things. But yeah, that totally distracted me. I was like, sweet Jesus, someone knocked something over.
Well, Frankie, something I want to ask you about that I've seen you do, I believe either on TikTok or YouTube, is diagnosing and treating Malocchio with like olive oil and water. Now, I don't know if you'll share personally what you do, but would you talk a bit more about that? Because like I've used other methods, but never like the olive oil and water method.
Olive oil and water is by far like the most common diagnosis you'll find in like any text on Italian magic. My first ever research text that I found talking about Calabria was folk practices or like indigenous practices in Calabria, and it talked about oil and water. It talked about 3 different ways that different healers did it, and it's pretty well spread, which is why I do it. It's because that's the one that I know the best. It's all about, well, firstly, I think the olive oil is considered blessed. It's considered holy. It has ties to Athena. It's very easy to bless your own olive oil. I keep my olive oil that I use for cures on my ancestor altar, and then I kind of grab it and I do the pinky finger. Which is the other thing. You have to use your finger, which this was a tip that someone gave me on TikTok. They were like, try using your finger for this instead of a spoon. And it changed my life. I was like, what? A lot of the cures I do are for myself because I'm still very much learning it. I have gotten a lot better at it than I was when I first started, when I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing or what this means, but I'm going to do it anyway because it feels right. Now I'm able to kind of discern what certain shapes mean, who sent it, and usually the who is kind of vague, but then you kind of use process of elimination, like certain symbols in the oil mean that a certain type of person sent it. If they're all grouped around the like little dots of oil around the edges of the bowl, mean that it's a lot of people that sent it to you. So then I think, okay, did I get a video that went very viral recently? Did a lot of people look at my content? Did I show up in a space that I'm not usually in? And then I use the process of elimination that way. But a lot of it is, you know, from what I've talked about with other individuals, similar to kind of what we would think of Olympia, where it's like looking and seeing what's there and what's been put on you, and then taking methods to cure it or cleanse it. With Malocchio, for me, I use, you know, a specific prayer that I honestly think, I'm like, did I come up with it? No. It like came to me in a dream, which is why I'm pretty sure my ancestors gave it to me. They were like, this one, use this one. And since I've been using it, it's been like worked crazy well. But I do it a lot for myself. I do it a lot for friends. Sometimes they're like, I'm having bad luck. And I'm like, okay, let me do a cure for you. Back in the day, Malocchio was everything. Every bad thing, like from malaria to, it wasn't malaria. It was tuberculosis. It was like any disease, anemia, like so many physical conditions were attributed to someone throwing the evil eye your way. So when we look at Malocchio nowadays, we have to take into consideration that this was used as an explanation for a lot of things that we now have explanations for. Like certain illnesses, certain diseases. There's a specific, you know, rash that was associated with Malocchio that we now know what it's called, like what causes it or why it happens. Excuse me. That isn't to say that sometimes physical effects can't happen from Malocchio. But what I try to do is I try to meet people halfway with, okay, historically this is how it's used. In the modern day, we know some of these historical things weren't accurate. We know you're probably not suffering from like a disease that is long-term because of Malocchio. You're probably suffering from something like a cold. Or you have like a moment where you're feeling sick, but you know nothing, like then it goes away after you do it. I try to hit out the mundane ones first because Malocchio is a cure and it is folk medicine in the same way that it's folk magic. A lot of the times that I've, you know, suffered from Malocchio, how I know it's hit me is because if it's targeted towards me from a viewer or someone who's seen my content, my social media accounts suffer because they're not hitting me, they're hitting Chaotic Witch Hunt. If someone is hitting me, like they know me personally, ooh, that's a little messier. I once had a four week period where I was getting a new illness every week. I like pulled my neck, and then I had a UTI, and then I had a sore throat, and then I had like, it was nothing.
Oh my God.
And it would get better at the end of the week, and I would have something new the next week. And so I finally did a reversal, and it was someone's intentional or unintentional evil eye that had built up forever. And this was someone that was close to me. It just built up to the point where it was so severe that I was getting sick as soon as I got better. And if, like the first 2 weeks into it, I'm like, this is just a bad coincidence. And then I hit the 4th week and I'm like, all right, I just hurt my finger. This makes no sense. I'm gonna do something about this. But I try to meet people with, like, some people say, like, if you're feeling anxious, if you're having bad luck, and I'm like, that is so non-specific. Like, did your tire go flat out of nowhere and then something else happened after that? I try to go between, like, 1 to 3 things happening, and it's, like, uncommon for you. Like, you know, you checked your tire pressure earlier today and it was fine, so how did you get a flat tire? Does it look like someone, like, slashed your tires? I had a situation in a grocery store where I went with my partner, and I was in the grocery store, and all of a sudden I was sweating and shaking and feeling nauseous and had a headache. And I'm sitting there like, I think my blood sugar is dropping, because I usually have blood sugar drops when I don't eat enough. And I'm like, that's so weird though. I ate earlier today. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I could be dehydrated. We left the grocery store. I didn't eat anything. I barely drank anything, and I was better by the time we got home. I felt better. And I'm like, someone in that grocery store was looking at me funny, because as soon as I left the situation, as soon as I left the environment, I felt better, which doesn't make any sense for it being a blood sugar drop. Those don't get better till I eat something. It doesn't make sense for me being dehydrated. I barely drink any water. It's these things that it's very specific to knowing your body, knowing your moods, knowing what's common for you and uncommon for you. And, you know, being cautious. Like, if you feel like really sick out of nowhere, make sure go to the doctor, rest, take care of yourself before you start looking at it like it's malocchio. And that's just from, you know, the history of malocchio. We've seen it cause physical illness, but is it physical illness every time? It may just be bad luck. It may just be you stub your toe way too many times in one day, and it's like, oh, that's really weird. Why am I stubbing my toe so many times? Right. Stuff like that. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the spiritual social media sphere will immediately always say, this is a sign, this is an omen, but really, like, lose the discernment of, okay, let's integrate the mundane and the spiritual. Let's, like you're doing, Frankie, like analyzing, okay, like you took your tire pressure, now it's like flat. Like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But, you know, did you just run over a rusty nail and now your tire's flat and that's the only thing that's been happening to you? So not interpreting every single thing as a sign, or people so quick to want to jump into spirit or deity work because they got one quote unquote sign and suddenly think a whole god is reaching out to them, you know? So yeah, thank you I actually have a grocery store evil eye story too. There was a few months back.
Do you really?
Yes. And so thankfully I was wearing my red bracelet with that I just bought from a Botanica a week ago.
I wasn't wearing anything.
See, I
fucked up.
I got a matching one for me and my partner. It was a red bracelet like this, traditional Latin American magic, and it had like a little Guadalupe pendant, and then the evil eyes were in red. And we were at a grocery store, and my partner lives in Portland, so I was visiting them in Portland. We were at a grocery store. We were in the spice aisle specifically, and some dude walked by and made like a homophobic remark. Now, thankfully, like nothing happened to either of us. Like it was just kind of like an offhanded remark, and we went our ways. But as soon as we got back to his apartment, my bracelet, which I just bought a week before, broke. Like as I was taking it off, and I wasn't like aggressively removing it; it just snapped and broke. And I was like, huh. Okay, well, I see what happened with that little homophobic remark and where that went. But yeah, just grocery stores, man.
Grocery stores are like
liminal spaces.
Liminal spaces. I think I was wearing a tank top, and I don't shave my armpits just because I'm lazy, and I I felt some eyes on me because of that, and I knew I was like, I don't know, like I should cover up before I go. I don't want people to look at me funny. And then I got sick, and I'm like, which one of you motherfuckers?
She was probably Filipino. She was probably an older Filipino lady, honestly.
It was some powerful fucking shit. I was like, I am feeling so sick. Oh my god, what is happening? But
you know what's very interesting? Those things happen to me all the time, especially when I'm going to like a family event. That happens to me. It doesn't. I don't necessarily. It's gotten a lot better within the last couple of years, but it was bad, especially like with like my mid-20s where I just felt heavy. I mean, I think that might be also a trauma response, just being around my family sometimes, but yeah, but to actually feel physically sick when you're around folks that you are related to but also don't want to be around, it's happened before.
That's so not fun for so many reasons, feeling physically sick around family members.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's gotten better, so thank goodness that's
good. I'm glad.
So how do you when you do because personally, if something like that would happen to me, like the first thing that I would do is like, all right, what's the if I realize that, okay, this is a magical issue, this is something I need to address magically, I'm lighting a candle, I'm doing a novena. So like, I know that you do novena. What are some novenas that you enjoy doing? Like, what's your favorites? What is something that you like to do, and what is proven to work?
I do Lady of the Miraculous Medal a lot because that's what my grandma prayed that, and my great grandma prayed that. So it's like a while back. I have a novena to Our Lady of Good Success that I like to use a lot, that I find to be very beneficial. There's another one. What I do is I look up novenas to specific saints, and I find one that's kind of one maybe not as popular, and I start doing that. I find myself gravitating towards praying the rosary a lot as of recently. I say my 9-day prayers for like big things. I pray the rosary a lot. If I'm feeling like I need a little bit more protection, I need some assistance from ancestors and Mary and Diana, I'm like, all right, let me bust out the rosary. Let's go. And sometimes I'll do a rosary for 9 days in a row, which isn't necessarily a novena prayer, but I consider it to be, it's like, excuse me, I'm burping a lot. It's a 9-day prayer for me. Or I'll get a saint card, and on the back I will recite a prayer to them for 9 days. I also have a copy of the Raccolta, which has fallen on my head multiple times. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But in there they have prayers that are 9 days with supplications, and sometimes, or not supplications, there's a word that I am looking for. It's indulgences. It has indulgences in it. As well as that, there's a novena that I really like. I have do I have my little novena book? I don't. I have a little novena book, and I go through that one, and I'm like, which one should I do today? I may dedicate it to a specific saint. I may find one to Mary that feels right. Or I may just kind of do prayers for 9 days to a specific saint and change it every day and do a specific one every day, even if it's not specifically a novena. It really depends. I'm not very good at like choosing a prayer and sticking with it. I've had so many times where I'm like, I'm going to do a 9-day prayer for you, and it's on day 4, and I'm like, I haven't prayed in 2 days.
Oh my God, you're preaching
so
to
familiar.
the choir.
It sounds so familiar.
It's so bad.
Preaching to the choir.
And then I start up again, and I'm like, day 5, and they're like, where have you been? And I'm like, I was getting railed. Like, I don't know, I'm sorry. Like, I was doing heathenist things. The problem is, it's always when I'm at my boyfriend's house, and then I come back, and it's like crawling back, like, so I forgot for 2 days, and it's like, and I wasn't doing anything very godly, so I can't, and sometimes they're like, I'm not helping you, and I'm like, well, I get it.
Right.
I get it. I was just very taken with my boyfriend for 3 days and forgot you. So sometimes I have this awful like image in my head of like praying a novena, and the next day I don't say the novena, and one of the saints just checks in and just sees like God knows what happening at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, and then being like, and just walking away. Like, that's what I imagine.
You have to make that a TikTok. You have to make that whole everything.
I gotta write it down.
You have to make, because that's fucking hilarious.
Seeing me like get drunk on a Dave and Buster's, and I forgot the novena, and they're like, "What the fuck is this kid doing?" Like, sometimes I just worry. And then it's always worse when it's a saint that I like pray to a lot, where it's like Saint Anthony or Saint Mary. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I like got fucked up doggy style and I forgot. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And it's always the worst because I'm like, oh, I gotta go. It's like crawling back from like being out too late at your parents' house, and they're like, where were you? And I'm just like,
right.
You know where I am. You know what I've been doing. And it's like, go confess right now. Like, go tell me what you did. And I'm like, oh, please. It's awful every time. It's like, some people will be like, well, you shouldn't have shame around sex. And I'm like, no, I don't. It's only when I'm in the middle of a novena with a saint and I forget it because I'm having sex.
Right.
Because that to me is like, oh, that's just like, there's something about it. And every time I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm back. Would you like some wine? They're like, no, I don't want wine. And I'm like, oh, man.
Believe it or not, I actually have a sex novena story. And
oh my God.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Ryan is in some way associated to the story, but not in the way that you think. So
oh, no.
Ryan and I were doing a 9-day, or doing a novena for the Holy Spirit. And in Ryan's incredible timing, because this was Ryan's idea, it was right around my birthday. And right around my birthday, I went to Vegas. And whenever I don't know if I told Ryan this, but there's a thing that I do whenever I travel. It's just something that I do. It's like a tradition, I guess.
You told me.
Whenever I leave home and I'm like staying somewhere else, like if I'm staying overnight somewhere else, I need to entertain a gentleman. I need to have sex. I have sex every single time I travel. Yeah, I got
every time.
Every time. I haven't missed one yet.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much. But yes, every single time. I haven't missed one yet. It's bound to happen, but I haven't missed one yet. So I was in Vegas and we were doing this novena, and I was telling Ryan and I had an agreement that every day I brought the candle with me to Vegas. I built an altar in my hotel room, and I brought the candle, the novena candle, with me because I just didn't want to stop. I wanted to do it, so I brought the novena. There was a novena candle with me in my luggage, and I actually got stopped because the novena candle wasn't. Because I don't know, maybe it looks like a bomb. I don't know, but they actually stopped me and like told me to show, like they wanted to see what this was, and I told them it was a candle. Anyways, so I lit the candle the second we got there. Blah 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 blah. That night I got a ring on my phone. I don't know how to imitate the grinder noise, but it's
that's
like
pretty close.
That was close.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bad thing that I anyways. So it was, I think around, it was about to turn 8:00, and I was like, ooh, fuck. Okay, I need to, because they need to get like, they need to make sure that they have time to clean up and like get ready and like actually come to my, whatever. So I was like, is this gonna be? So I had to tell him, I was like, yo, listen, I need you out of here by 9:00. Are you cool with that? So I didn't tell Ryan which night it was, but it was one of those nights that a dude literally just left. And Ryan, I sent you the picture of the dude. Do you remember that?
They were so pretty.
Oh, they were pretty. I'm so upset that I had to kick him out. I had to kick him out because I had to pray. I was like, and I didn't want to tell. I really just like, yo, listen, we're going to do something that is very unholy, but you need to leave because I have to pray. Like,
Oh
it's
my
very,
God, that's so
I know, it was
funny.
like, oh, but knowing that I had to sit down, it's strange though, because after I sat down, like, all jokes aside, after I sat down and prayed, it was like, it didn't feel unnatural
Oh,
for me to like
no. Yeah.
fuck my brains out and then also sit down and pray to the Holy Spirit.
People have been fucking their brains out and sitting down and then praying for generations. They just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm like, I should be having sex. Sex is good. Sex is healthy and natural. I just always feel bad. There's always a little bit of like, sorry, I forgot.
But I also think the reason why the Holy Spirit sent me that very pretty man because
hell yes.
I was like, you need to get it here by 9. I was like, all right. So you're not gonna get to spend the whole night with this man. I'm gonna send you a really good one. I'm gonna send you a really good one. You're gonna have to kick him out, but he's gonna be good. Oh.
He's gonna be good.
Ooh, that's making my liver quiver. Anyways, but yeah. So that's my sex novena story. I think we need to all consolidate all of our sex novena stories into one thing.
Oh yeah, Ryan, do you have a sex novena story?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Ryan's like, I am a child of God.
I'm a Christian woman.
A woman
I'm
of
a
God.
virgin.
That's all of that. That's dark-sided. That y'all just preach. That's dark-sided.
She's doing dark-sided stuff.
I've never gone to the Catholic Church and confessed my sins, but sometimes I think about it, just for the shits and giggles of what the priest's reaction.
Oh my God, I tried. Within the last year, I've gone a handful of times.
Yeah.
And the last time I went is probably the last time I'll ever go again. Just because, like, I felt like I was being specific. I was like, yeah, I've been having lots of sex and doing lots of drugs and like this, that, and the third. And then the father was like, you're not being specific enough. I'm like, oh, do you want me to be like, oh, I fucked the brains out of my boyfriend and I just took, or never mind, I'm not gonna say that on this public podcast. I just smoked a bunch of weed and went to a rave and blew my mind out. Like, no,
how is that not specific enough?
Right?
Did he have a gaydar going off? He's like,
no, I was like, he's supposed to say, I was like, how tall is your partner? You know,
right?
He was 5'7", smelled like apricots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what difference does it make?
Oh.
Yeah, and haven't been back since. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just confess in prayer. I don't need to go to a priest.
Fuck a priest. It's always,
but also
you're
fuck a
trying
priest.
to
Fuck a priest.
listen. Off topic. That Fleabag stuff. I don't know if you've seen Fleabag.
No,
She fucks a priest.
Oh,
And sometimes I'm like,
good for
What's
her.
Fleabag?
it's a show. You guys don't know about Fleabag?
I've heard the title. I don't know anything about it.
I would watch it. I would generally watch it. It's pretty good. And she fucks a priest. So it's like a nice little treat where you can't do it, but you can watch someone else do it. What was I thinking of? Oh, my mom said something the other day and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I have this card that I got in the mail. I am an annual member for the Central Association of the Miraculous Medal.
Oh,
Which I don't know how I got this. I didn't give them any money. But they just sent it to me and they're like, your membership has started from August 15th, 2022 to August 14th, 2023. And I'm like, I dead ass what? I don't know how I got this.
huh.
But I opened it and the letter said, I greatly bestow upon you this annual membership card, from the Miraculous Medal Association. And then it's like Father John Cheedy or whatever. And I think John Cheedy is a person. No, never mind. Maybe. But it's Father. And my mom looks at it and goes, she's like, what's the weirdest thing about the church? And I go, what? She's like, well, you're trying to connect with the divine feminine. You're talking to something that is, the mother, and a man has to give you permission to do it. A man comes in and says, let me give you the divine feminine. And then, because it's always a priest that gives you, or there's always a little bit of, there's a buffer between you and the divine. Even if it's not the divine feminine, even if it's not Mary, if it's Jesus, if it's God, there is someone in between. And usually I say man because within the Catholic Church, most priests are men, cis men to be very specific. Cis old white men to be even more specific. And I think that was always my pushback against the church, is because I do not need to go through someone to talk to the divine. I do not need you to give me something to show that I am in communion with the divine. I just go to them. And that's the part of the church that my mom really didn't like either. She's like, oh, man tells me that Mary loves me. And I'm like, I know Mary loves me. I don't need you to tell me that. I don't need you to be in between it. But that's the part that always gets me about religion, is when there's an in-between person, I'm like, why don't you just talk to them yourself?
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, like, go out into the woods, drink a bunch of wine, pray, and something will happen. You may die, but then you know. Like, then you know where heaven is.
There's your answer.
There's your answer. But I've always, my divining has always been straight to them. I go straight to them, even if it's through a friend who is a tarot reader who helps me connect with them. I don't have a clergy or an official in between me and them. Because sometimes it's like, well, you need to confess in order to talk to the divine. And I'm like, fuck no, I don't. I have done nothing wrong.
Yeah. And even if we have, it's like, can't that sincere forgiveness that we have in our heart be enough, like, of an offering to be forgiven by the divine? Like, you're telling me I have to be forgiven by an intermediary? Like, no.
Not the intermediary.
Also, I can do that at home. Like, you're gonna make me drive to your church so I can tell you what I did wrong? Like, no, I'm gonna stay home.
Take my money, like, ask me to give you some money in a little bowl. And then,
I always look down when they come to me with the basket, because I do try to go to mass occasionally, and I'll just like, oh, I'm reading the hymn they're singing during the collect. Oh, sorry, I'm a broke college student. I don't have any money.
That's what I do. I'm like, I'm going to be very invested in the Bible right now. I don't want to give the church money unless they're donating it to a nonprofit. And even then, depending on the nonprofit. Because if it's a pro-life nonprofit, we got an issue. They exist. It's weird.
Yeah, they do. Well, here's the thing. I also, there are times where I do give money, but I leave it on the altars, and it's usually because when I take holy water, I don't take what they offer, like, because they're like this big. I take a 64 ounce jug, and I dip it into the well, and I take that whole thing with me. So I'll leave like $1 at the.
That is so Filipino of you. I hate you.
Wait, you can find holy water at churches?
Yeah.
That you can just take?
Some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either they'll have like the giant like font that everyone will dip their fingers in to make the sign of the cross, or one church I just went to in San Francisco has like this giant metal vat that just says holy water, and you can just press the little button and fill up whatever container you bring with holy water.
One of the churches that I went to has it's a Gatorade thing. It's like this bright orange thing at the front of the church, and you just it's kind of like pouring into a cup. It's all holy water. Isn't
That's
that fun?
so funny.
Yeah.
You can just drink it.
Yeah.
You can drink the holy water.
Please don't drink holy water.
I mean, you can. The Eastern Orthodox Church does.
Are you not supposed to drink holy water?
I think you can.
I mean, if it's in a well, I don't think that's a really good idea.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was like, will my insides burn up? But
no.
on a basic safety.
Yeah, just basic like bacteria that sits on just sitting water, not a good idea. But I'm pretty sure that depending on where the water's coming from and then like putting into a vat, I don't think that's a big deal. But where I go, it's a huge well in the lobby of holy water, and everyone's sticking their finger in there. You know what I mean?
I have to start hopping around to the churches and searching for holy water because I am out.
Yeah, I know a lot of them took it, the ones that would have vats took it away, of course, during COVID, or even emptied the fonts because the pandemic. But a lot of churches have been going to as of late, or the ones I have gone to have started to put it more available again.
I want to get a gallon. I'm going to get one of those big like water
jugs. That's what I do.
Empty it, and then just...
That's exactly what I do.
Like, there we go.
That is exactly what I do. I literally just went to the 99-cent store. I got a big-ass jug that I keep in my car just for holy water, for stealing holy water, which I love doing. You're not really you're not really stealing it, but you're not supposed to take a fucking half a gallon of holy water is a lot of fucking
I
holy
would feel
water.
bad if someone walked in on me doing that. I'd be like, I'm not going to stop.
Right.
That's why
just make eye contact and just
like I won't
eye contact
pull away.
As you walk out. Right, and then like
I need to get someone with like scary dog privileges to like ward them off, because I definitely look like I look like out of place enough in a church for someone to be suspicious about. Wow, I'm taking holy water. Fozzie's raising their hand. Like, I'd walk in, it's like short hair. I got like bones on my earrings and a skirt, and I'm like, it's like, do you go here? Do you even live here? And I'm like, I talk to St. Andrew on a daily basis. Leave me alone, please.
Yeah, I don't feel bad at all. I do leave the money at the shrine just to say thank you, but it's not. I mean, I know it goes to the church, but I leave it on the altar. I don't put it in a fucking basket.
It's the thought that counts. It
Right.
goes to that altar. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, please, kids, get steal holy water. You're supposed to.
Steal holy water with a 99-cent jug, half-gallon jug.
Folk magic, baby.
Usually, Frankie, we like to ask everyone that we bring on to provide any sources that you recommend. I know you have a book that has sources that you recommend, and also you have numerous social medias, including a YouTube video that has all of the sources. And
oh my god, I'm so excited right now.
So do you mind just take your time and let us know any of the sources that you recommend and further reading, or social media accounts, people that you recommend? Go for it.
Oh my god. Okay, so I'm going to start with social media accounts. The Root Circle on Instagram does Italian ancestral allyship classes where you connect with the ancestral herbal allies if you're Italian or Italian American. She also makes amazing content, and she has a Patreon, and she's coming out with a book. There is I forgot. I think it's Melanie Jade 6 is Sicilian. I love her. She's a smaller account. And then Mary Grace Farren, of course, has a YouTube channel. I love it. She does a lot of talking about the saints. And there is a specific blog that I will give you guys because it's Gail Faith Edwards. I think Gail Faith Edwards is the name. I'm taking her Benedicaria training course. This is her work or her classes, but she also has a website, and I think it's The Ways of the Wild Heart is the blog. I'm going to write that down, by Gail Faith Edwards, and she talks about Italian folk magic there. That's a lot of online resources. You can also find Sabina Magliocco, and I'm going to spell it out, and she has multiple sources and free online stuff where she talks about Italian folk magic. She also has articles you can find, research articles. From there, books I recommend. I love Italian Folk Magic by Mary Grace Farren. That's what I recommend to start with because it's from, Italian American perspective. And it's not too research heavy. You can get a lot from it without having to go through 50 pages with really in small print, because some of those research texts, they're size 9 font on an A4 page, and you're like, I can't read this. You're like, Italian Magic Secret Lives of Women, another one I love, and that's by Karen Crisis. That was the book that jump-started my journey. I love it. It has pictures. I love it. The one I read recently was Power and Magic in Italy by Thomas Houston. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm going to spell it. That is a anthropology thing. It is taking me a year to get through because it's so tiny print, but is it Houston? No, it's Hochschild. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Hochschild. That's an anthropology journal. Ernesto Di Martino, his works has a lot of good stuff, and that is specific to Lucanian magic, which you're going to have to figure out if you were in Lucania or not, because Lucania doesn't exist anymore. Cosenza was on the border of Lucania. Not anymore now, and then now it's Calabria. So Cosenza also, someone was like, it's Basilica, or it's Basilicata, and I'm like, what? No, what? So I don't know where Cosenza is. It's in 3 different regions or something. Mostly Calabria. Let me think. The things we do. The ways. Things We Do, The Ways of the Holy Benedette. It's another one by, I forget his name, but if you look it up, there's one author who wrote that book. Honoring Your Ancestors by Mallory Vedoez. She's also Italian-American. She's
book.
Initiated into a couple traditions that are not Italian folk magic, but she does have some Italian elements in that book. And then, my favorite thing, look up the native plants in your ancestors' town. Use like a native plant finder and just start researching those plants, because once you find those plants and connect with them, everything else is going to start falling into place. The last thing I recommend is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, because if you're on Turtle Island, you need to desettle, decolonize, and reading about indigenous methods of animism and plant allies is really important, especially because we have a lot of information, especially with Robin Wall Kimmerer and the book she wrote about that and that indigenous knowledge. But yeah, that is everything I have, because the other ones are like not enough information to recommend, or they're so confusing and weird that I wouldn't recommend it without like heavily critically reading it. But
I mean, that was already so many sources of recommendations, so thank you for that, Frankie. Also, do you offer any services other than like your amazing content creation that you're constantly putting out?
Yeah, I do tarot readings. I have a few spells that are available on my website right now, if people are interested. And then I do workshops. I just did my first workshop recently. My second one is going to be out soon. If you are interested in my workshops, you can subscribe to my Patreon, and that's the best way to have access to it and know what's coming up. And that's at the book club tier and up. Anything like access tiers, the $3 or $6 ones, you get discounts for the workshops, but you don't get free access. But tarot readings are the big thing. Patreon is the big thing. And then my YouTube and my content creation there. Those are my kind of biggest things that I do.
Dope. And do you have a link tree in your IG bio that has all the links to all those? Perfect.
Yes. I love my little link tree. I paid $6 for it. So it better be worth it. But yeah, that's everything.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Frankie. I'm so glad. I mean, I'm still astounded that we've been talking in the same group chat for like what feels like a year now.
Yep.
And now we're finally having our first face-to-face conversation. No.
It's seriously, so I know Frankie talks about how much they love us. I understand. I love us too. I understand why. I would love us too. I mean, look at this. Look at what we're dealing with here.
Look at us.
Yeah. Look at just the beautiful queers. But the thing about it is that it astounds me sometimes the way social media and how beautiful social media can the potential beauty that social media has is that I probably in a different, I would have never met Frankie. I would have never even had the privilege to sit and speak to Frankie. And then to know that Frankie was like literally part of like you and Olivia, the biggest, like you guys were the gateway to me, or yeah, you were one of the gateways into me, starting to practice witchcraft. Olivia was actually the one who told me Christian witches exist. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you saying? What are you? So like, diving into both of your practices and seeing how, it was amazing, and seeing this full circle thing. You say you're fangirling. I am fangirling. I am absolutely elated to have.
There's fangirling all around. All three of us fangirling.
We're all around. Yeah, I'm absolutely elated and so privileged and so happy that you were able to donate your time and sit with us. And I can't wait for this episode to be published. Yeah. And I would love to have you on again.
I was just going to say, I feel like there's so much more to talk about with
That'd be great. I'd love that.
Yeah, we're on almost 2 hours right now. I'm pretty sure that we can go all day.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But Frankie, please do us a favor. Grace us with your handles. Anything, the best way to reach you.
Best way to reach me is Chaotic Witch Aunt on all platforms. That's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. My Twitter is Aunt Chaotic, but I mostly just post memes on there. My Patreon is under Chaotic Witch Aunt, and that's where a lot of my work is. I do weekly tarot pulls, I do spells, I do everything. And my website is chaoticwitchaunt.com, which has links to a bunch of other things like my readings, my workshops, and my spells. So that's the best place you can find me.
And that has been another wonderful episode with our amazing guest, Frankie, joining us for our Unholy Communion of the Red Text podcast. I'm your co-host, Ryan, aka the Mestizo Mystic, on Instagram.
And I am Fonzie. I am Witch Illumiscente on Instagram and Twitter.
And we'll see y'all later for another Unholy Communion.